The silence in the boardroom wasn't just quiet, it was expensive. 42 floors above the Chicago pavement. Inside the nerve center of Sterling Capital, the air conditioning was set to a crisp 65 degrees. But the four men sitting on the south side of the obsidian conference table were sweating. 24 hours ago, these men were gods. They were the top closers at Apex Motors, strutting across the showroom floor, deciding who got to test drive a Porsche and who got escorted out by security. They were kings of a very small, very shiny hill. Now, they looked like cattle waiting for the hammer. At the head of the table, a high-backed leather chair was turned away from them, facing the sprawling gray violence of Lake Michigan. A hand, manicured and steady, tapped a Mont Blanc pen against the armrest. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was a countdown. But to understand why four men with seven-figure sales records were about to hyperventilate in a room worth more than their collective life insurance policies, we have to rewind. We have to go back 48 hours to a man who looked like he had lost everything. Alexander Sterling stood before the mirror in his penthouse, staring at a stranger. Usually, Alexander was a weapon of mass acquisition, double-breasted Tom Ford, Patek Philippe, a gaze that could strip the paint off a wall. He was the CEO of Sterling Capital, a private equity firm that didn't just buy companies, it gutted them and sold the bones. Today, he was wearing a costume of failure. He pulled on a canvas jacket stained with synthetic grease. He muddied his silver fox hair until he looked like a man who'd spent the last 30 years losing battles with alcohol and alimony. Sterling Capital had just acquired Apex Motors in a hostile takeover. The spreadsheets said the dealership was a gold mine, but Alexander didn't trust spreadsheets. He trusted instincts. He wanted to see the rot before he signed the renovation checks. He didn't want the VIP tour. He wanted the truth. He stepped out of the penthouse, leaving his ego and his Amex Black Card on the dresser. Today, he was prey. The showroom of Apex Motors was a temple of excess, polished marble, glass walls, and the smell of premium leather and desperation. Alexander shuffled through the revolving doors. He kept his head down, clutching the lapels of his dirty jacket. He acted small. He made himself invisible to the wealthy couples sipping complimentary espresso. But he wasn't invisible to the sharks. By the reception desk, 3 salesmen in slim-fit Italian suits were huddled like a pack of wolves. In the center was Julian, the sales director. Julian was a man who could calculate your net worth by looking at your watch. He saw Alexander's boots. He saw the stain on the jacket, and his eyes went dead. "Security's slacking," Julian murmured, barely moving his lips. "We got a stray." Alexander walked towards a metallic gray GT3 RS. Sticker price, $280,000. He reached out, his hand trembling with feigned reverence, and let his finger trace the hood. "Don't!" The word wasn't shouted. It was fired like a silencer. Julian was suddenly there, standing 2 inches from Alexander. He didn't look angry. He looked disgusted. He pulled a microfiber cloth from his pocket and wiped the spot Alexander had touched, staring him dead in the eye while he did it. "You're depreciating the asset," Julian said, his voice smooth and cold. This is a showroom, Pops, not a shelter. The bus stop is 2 blocks east. Alexander looked up, widening his eyes. I have money. I've been saving. I wanted to see. You have money? Julian laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Buddy, the sales tax on this car costs more than your life story. You're scaring the real clients. Walk away before I have you trespassed. Alexander stood his ground, letting his shoulders slump. Is that policy? Turn away cash? Julian leaned in. He smelled of expensive cologne and peppermint. Policy is for people. You're a stain on the upholstery. The humiliation was surgical, absolute. Alexander turned to leave. He had seen enough. The culture here was cancerous. But as he reached for the door, a hesitation. Sir? A young woman stood behind the reception desk. Sarah. Her blazer was cheap polyester. Her eyes were tired, but her jaw was set. She held out a bottle of water. It's free, she said, her voice shaking slightly as she looked past Alexander to glare at Julian. Ignore him. He's having a bad quarter. Do you want to sit down for a minute? I can get you a brochure. The showroom went silent. Julian spun around. Sarah? The menace in his voice was palpable. You are an admin. You are furniture. If you speak to him again, you can pack your box. Am I unclear? Sarah flinched, but she didn't lower the water. He's a human being, Julian. He is a waste of square footage. And now, so are you. Get back to the phones or get out. Alexander took the water. His hand brushed Sarah's. For a split second, the act dropped. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, terrifying, locked onto hers. He saw the fear, but he also saw the spine. Thank you, Alexander said. His voice dropped an octave. The stutter was gone. You have no idea what you just bought yourself. He reached into his dirty pocket, pulled out a black business card with nothing but a number and an embossed gold lion, and pressed it into her hand. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., the penthouse. Don't be late. He walked out before Julian could blink. The next morning, Sarah stood in the lobby of Sterling Tower. She felt like she was going to vomit. The building was a fortress of glass and steel. She looked at the card, then at the elevator bank. Why am I here? The old man was probably the janitor, or crazy, but she had nothing left to lose. Julian had written her up the second the old man left. She was on thin ice. She rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that cost more than her parents' house. Go right in, Sarah, the receptionist said without looking up. They're waiting. They? Sarah pushed open the heavy oak doors. The boardroom, the view of the lake, and standing by the window, the man from yesterday. But the jacket was gone. The grime was gone. Alexander Sterling turned around. The charcoal suit fit him like a second skin. He radiated power. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like the judge, jury, and executioner. Mr. Sarah stammered. Sterling, he said calmly. And you're the only person in that building with a survival instinct. He gestured to the empty chair at the right hand of the table. Sit down, Sarah. The show is about to start. Before she could process the insanity of the moment, the side doors opened. Security guards escorted 4 men into the room. Julian led the pack, looking annoyed, checking his watch. Then he looked up. He saw the view. He saw the luxury. he saw Alexander Sterling, the billionaire owner of the firm that just bought his company. And then he saw Sarah, sitting at the billionaire's right hand. Julian's face went the color of ash. He stopped walking. His knees actually buckled. Alexander didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just pointed to the chairs on the opposite side of the table. Sit. They sat. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. Finally, Alexander picked up a remote. Click. The massive screen behind him flickered to life. It was 4K security footage from the showroom floor. Specifically, the moment Julian wiped the car and called Alexander a stain. The audio was crystal clear. Alexander paused the video on a close-up of Julian's sneering face. He turned to the table. "I didn't bring you here to fire you, Julian. Firing you is too easy. That's just paperwork." Alexander tossed a thick file onto the table. Thud. It slid across the mahogany and stopped right in front of Julian. The label on the folder didn't say personnel file. It said audit, fraud, and embezzlement. Alexander leaned forward, his voice a whisper that sounded like a gunshot. "I brought you here to ask you about the $300,000 missing from the collision center accounts and why you thought I wouldn't find it."